Everyone. You guys made it to the Friday. I'm so happy to have two product data scientists today sharing about their experience working in big tech and beyond that, we'll explore how to break into product data science, what kind of data science roles exist out there, because many of us, when we're entering the field of data science, we're not really sure what kind of roles exist in the industry or even academia. So I thought it would be a great idea to bring industry professionals, experts, and let them share what kind of roles exist out there within the data science field and also share about product data science specifically, because honestly, even from my personal experience, I haven't heard much about product data science before. Usually I would just focus on analytics side or engineering part, but I'm learning a lot just by interacting with these wonderful professionals that you should connect on LinkedIn. And today we have Dawn and Kasia. Dawn has worked at let me honestly, I think I would I would maybe, you know what we should do? Maybe we should let you guys introduce yourselves and your own professional background so audience can be prepared for today's panel. Let me know whoever wants to begin.
Can go first since you kind of started for me.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Looking forward to all of your questions. I am a product data scientist. I'm currently at an education tech startup called Class Dojo, which our goal is to help every kid on Earth get an education they love. Prior to this, I was at Instagram and Patreon as a product data scientist. So I've done it for about 5 years. My journey into product data science wasn't straightforward at all. I took a lot of twists and turns to get there. I was in finance for a while. Then I became a professional cheerleader. Then I went into business analytics and then business intelligence engineering. And then I went into data science. So, I've interviewed a bunch. I've tried a lot of things. I've learned a lot on my own. So, really excited to hear what questions you have and hope I can be helpful. And I will pass it on to Kasia.
Actually, when Mary earlier said that she was so sure who wants to start, and I said to do this, they had work where like even once like I didn't know who wants to start. I like have my coworker in the camera, so glad I didn't have to do that. So I'm Kasia. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm currently doing the same thing as work. I've been at work for 5 years. So
Kasia, sorry to interrupt. Just I don't know if that's only me, but the audio is a bit muffled. I don't know. I cannot hear many parts of maybe it's the headphones, or we could try another.
Okay, what's it now?
I think it's the same.
Oh,
sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure we all can hear you because this is important.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Okay, how's it now?
I think it's a little bit better, but we can still. But yeah, maybe speak.
Yeah, I mean, I could try to speak slower, which is a big challenge for me. So yeah, let me know if there's anything you can't hear. So let me just say that I'm a data science techniques work. I've been at Square for over 5 years, so quite a while on different teams and different roles. Prior to Square, I worked at Medium before that 5 stars and Unitol, all of which were much smaller companies than Square. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great, thank you.
Take the opposite. I feel like I went from big tech to like tiny company, and then you went from small to big. So very interesting.
Yes, I'm glad to see we have the variety of background here. And I know also Kasia is a public speaker and she talks a lot about her own career path. And you should definitely follow everyone on LinkedIn. We're going to share links at the end of the panel. But let's go ahead and begin today's discussion. So I would like to start with this question, probably is the first one in my mind at the moment is how many data science specifically related roles are out there in the industry that, for instance, a person who is graduating from a master's degree from data science could potentially consider, if whoever wants to. Yeah.
That's a big question. I can start maybe, and then Kasia, let me know if I'm missing anything. So I think about the data functions and tech specifically in three general categories. You have your product roles, the non-product roles, and then you have infrastructure type roles. So in the product side, that's what Kasia and I do, right? So you have your product data scientist or product analyst. Those two terms generally are used interchangeably. Then you have your more machine learning data science, also within product, and analytics engineering, also within product. Then on the non-product side, you tend to have things like your marketing analysts, trust and safety analysts, business analysts, sales analysts, things that work more on the business side of things. And then I'd say like kind of the underlying infrastructure teams, you would have things like data platform, business intelligence, and then your research scientists and apply scientists. That's generally how I think about it. So three general categories of product, non-product, and infrastructure. But Kasia, what do you think?
I think you nailed it, and you put it very eloquently of like what are the main groupings. I also personally think that the interesting thing is that these titles and these jobs are still evolving, right? I mean, when I was entering the data field, analytics engineer wasn't even a role, and now it is a role, right? It is a new role that has been created about the past couple of years or so. So those roles are always evolving. And one thing I'm gonna say is like always read the actual job descriptions. I've applied for data analyst roles that are actually data scientist role. I've seen data scientist roles that are heavier with infrastructure. I've seen data scientist roles that are more like machine learning engineering. So it really depends on like what the particular role entails and like the title one company is not exactly the same as the same title, that's a different company. And the other plot was this that it may also evolve over time because they possess like such a broad skill set. So they start off on a team at a company and just do foundational work, do a lot of infrastructure, do a lot of logging, and then move up the data science hierarchy of needs, and then move towards like doing more analytical work, eventually modeling, all of that. So you could be doing all that under the same title that you found all along.
Yeah, this sounds like there is a lot of options because when I first was starting out researching about data science, I mainly thought there's like analysts and scientists. I haven't even thought about engineers who do all the infrastructure work. But now that I like that you divided into like higher level categories of here's a business side of people that are just analyzing the data that business has, and then we have, as you said, new role within that. I presume sector is analytics engineer that is becoming even more popular these days, and another completely different side where it's more engineering heavy, and I'm sort of sometimes overwhelmed by the choices and the trajectories one can choose. But I was wondering how, for instance, of why did you guys end up in product science specifically? I guess we can transition towards that. Whoever wants to. Yeah.
I can kick us off. Also, I hope I fixed my audio. So awesome. So thank you for the tip. Whoever posted that in chat, that was very helpful. So I personally just kind of fell into it, which is probably not what you want to hear. I wish I could say, oh, I was like very intentional about getting into product data science, but I just started off my analytics career, and that's where the biggest need was within both of my first two jobs, where they really needed someone to do the product analytics, do some experimentation, make recommendations. And to me, that was really fun. It's kind of exploring the product and thinking about this, and working very closely with product managers. I mean, I did a bit of marketing analytics, did a bit of modeling work, kind of tried to experience a lot of it. Did a bunch of infrastructure work as well. I still do it. That's part of my role, but that's like my least favorite part of the role. So to me, it was just like really fun. There was a period of time where I even considered moving to product management, which I decided against. So, but it is a very common path. Maybe I'm getting ahead of the questions, but that is also a very common path for people working in product analytics or product data science to then switch to product management.
Nice. Yeah, I would say I kind of fell into mine too. Maybe I think for me, I just really wanted to work at Instagram. And that was my dream company, and I was going to do whatever it took to get in there. And the reason I wanted to work for Instagram was I actually did an internship with Facebook when I was in college. I didn't get a return offer. It was like really devastating. But knowing what I know now, I don't think I deserved an offer. So like, that was entirely on me. But when I did my internship at Facebook, I was just so mesmerized by everyone I worked with. And they made me feel like I wanted to grow old quicker, which I've never had that feeling before in my life because I just wanted to be more like them, which made me want to go back into Instagram. And so I chose the analytics path to go back to Instagram. I interviewed for them for Facebook a whole bunch of times before getting an offer. Um, and data science just felt like the right fit for what I was good at, which is math and data and storytelling. And so data science was the right fit, with the goal being Instagram. Really, that was the initial goal.
Interesting. You guys have like different metrics for decision making when it comes to choosing your career path. But I have some follow-up questions for both of you since you mentioned your career choices. I wonder, since I know that many people spend years figuring out and wearing different hats within the corporate roles. I wonder if there is a different method to apply when it comes to choosing your career path. For instance, I assume that product data science has to do with more communications work and understanding the business requirements and working with more with cross-functional teams, whereas infrastructure work might be just with problem has to do with problem thinking. Just completely different mindset altogether. So, do you think there's a different way approaching this, or?
I can take that first. I think the underlying skills are the same. I think for different paths of data that you take, you are expected to have spikes in different skills. But you should have the same kind of technical and soft skill foundation no matter what job in data you apply for. So the general way I think about it is you definitely need SQL, right? Like you 100% need SQL. Maybe some Python here and there, but I would prioritize SQL first. You definitely need to know your statistics. Again, the level to which you need to know statistics differs based on what kind of role you're looking for. And then you have to be a really good communicator and have understanding of the business, whether it's like product sense or a domain expertise in, say, advertising. You need to know like what business you're interviewing for. To me, those are the general three categories. I would say product data science leans a lot more towards like your product sense side of things. And then of course SQL, and then lighter, a little bit lighter on statistics, maybe leaning more towards experimentation. But for ML, I think you're just really heavy on statistics and really heavy on coding, and then lighter on the product sense. I would love to hear, Kasia, what you think, if that's like similar in your experience.
Yeah, I think I agree with you about the foundation, and then you kind of decide what you want to index more heavily on. But I've also seen like interesting situations where like the best data engineers or infrastructure folks that I've worked with also had really good business sense on top of their technical skills. Like that was what, that was when kind of the wow factor happens, where I've been like, oh wow, like this is really great to work with you because on top of like building this beautiful table for me, you also really understand why we're doing each step. That being said, that's not necessarily like you don't need to be amazing at everything.
Mm.
And the other thing I'm also seeing is like even for product data science, like lately I'm seeing a lot of successful projects where people really dive deeper into statistics, where you can use some interesting causal inference methodology where you can really pioneer how to use those methods to make product better and make recommendations. And those are the things that like make you stand out, I guess, not go beyond the basics.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think as you get more and more senior in your path, there is an expectation that you can flex between different roles, right? So I would say the best data scientist, well, not best, one of my favorite data scientists I work with now, he does product management part-time and then data science part-time. Like he'll do one for a few years and then switch to another and then switch back. So it's like he has that really cool perspective on product management and data science. And then the best data scientists I work with, they build their own pipelines, right? So they're basically data engineers and data scientists at the same time. So I would definitely agree with that. It's like the more you can flex outside just your specific data science skills, the more employable you become, right? Because now you can do way more for one job than someone else who can only do, say, a data science job.
Wow. I'm learning a lot. I'm so happy. I'm so happy that we brought you two together. Actually, I'm just realizing, I'm realizing how much fun we're gonna have. But great. So it looks like both of you are telling us that we either in either case, everyone needs to have the fundamental skills and the understanding of the business. But depending on the role that you choose, you can either just reiterating what I understood. You can either focus on statistics and coding when it comes to like machine learning, engineering, or data science, and I mean analytics, analytics side of it, where SQL comes in, of course. But let's head back to the questions that we had, because we know we had registrations. Thank you for people who have registered and submitted their questions. Many people just want to know what is the day-to-day of a product data scientist looks like. What do you basically do? What are your responsibilities?
I can kick us off. So I feel like I still do like a good chunk of traditional data science work. So like collecting data, making sure we have logging, specing out requirements, doing some like exploratory data analysis, monitoring dashboards and looking at our metrics and kind of figure out what's happening and why. But then the responsibilities and the analysis often focus on like user behavior, segmentation, funnels, user journey analysis. So you really are drilling into the pain points of your users and the feature usage. And like whenever you do like any sort of predictive modeling, that also often is to inform a product decision. And I work very closely with product managers. So I pretty much meet with them on regular basis on one-on-one in group settings. It does feel like my role is more meeting heavy than it would be if it was like a machine learning engineering type role, because there is a lot of collaboration, a lot of thinking about product. And the most fun part for me is like when I get to like brainstorm something with a product manager and like, insert data and like what I know to like what they know and complement each other to, you know, figure out some sort of product strategy, work on a new feature, set direction of the product in any way.
Sorry, mute. I would say my day-to-day is probably very similar. A lot more meetings than I would like. But it's kind of part for the course, right? Because as a product data scientist, as the name suggests, you're working on a product team. And you're part of this group of cross-functional partners. Let's say your product manager, your data engineer, engineers, and designers, researchers, everyone kind of like in that space. The goal is as a team to think about how you can make the product better. So meetings are kind of par for the course in that way because you have to collaborate with other people. I would say the bulk of my time is spent understanding the business and understanding our team's priorities and then telling stories with data. I think the storytelling part is like my favorite part about being a data scientist, but it's often overlooked in terms of how important that skill is. One of my coworkers, the product manager guy I was talking about, he says he spends hours writing a story after his analysis. And I would say I do the same thing because the data piece, like anyone can do that, but telling the story and really figuring out what the data is trying to tell you takes a whole lot of time. So I think typical like EDA type work, experimentation type work, pretty standard in my role, but the storytelling piece is my favorite and takes up the most amount of time.
Interesting. Yeah, I honestly hear that a lot. The storytelling in general is the fundamental piece of communications. And I was wondering, when it comes to that, how does a business approach this? Like, for instance, your manager or whoever establishes a project for you, and they what do they want to hear? Do they want to hear some like insights, opportunities on where you could maybe make more money by creating this new feature or serving this new segment that you found? Or are you mostly like troubleshooting or like understanding where the churn is? Or what are the business tasks, I guess?
So it really depends on the team you're on and the priorities of the team in the moment. A lot of times, I think to Kasia's point, like you are kind of monitoring dashboards. So if something is out of ordinary, you're the person who's on point to figure it out. And I would say like that's when you're triaging, like investigation work happens. I would say the most interesting questions that we get to work on, and Kasia, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. I think the most interesting questions I work on are typically not projects given to me. They usually come from like once you sit in meetings for a while, you're like, I have an intuition, or there's an assumption people are making that I don't think is right. And then you go down that path, and then you like start to really uncover insights that I would say like are blind spots for the company. And that's where like the most interesting work happens. And those are usually really, really big questions, right? Like it could be like, I have a hypothesis that we're investing too much in this business area. Like the company is putting too much money here. Is this true? And then you go down a rabbit hole of just trying to figure out what the opportunity size is, whether it makes sense. And that becomes like, I would say probably the most impactful work that you can do. It's usually like what you drive as your intuition that becomes the most impactful work. I hope you can't hear the dog. Okay.
I 100% agree. I feel like when you drive your own projects, when you come up with like, ideas, and then you take it to product, that's kind of where the magic happens. Um, because often the reactive requests are already confirming something that a product manager intuitively knows. On the occasion, it does happen that you bring them data and you tell them that they're completely wrong, and that's always fun to navigate. But I do love it when like, okay, here are some ideas I have. Here's what the impact this could have in the business if this idea works out, or if this model performs like I wanted to do, if it gives us the data or the outputs we want. That's really where data science magic happens. And this is also a lot easier if data at your company gets a seat at the table. If you are, working together with engineering, product management, design, um, when data is not an afterthought. And if that's currently the case, then I would encourage you to make noise. Really ask to be in those rooms when the conversations happen. Um, Make sure that this isn't a situation where like someone is deciding something and then 2 weeks in that they loop you in and they ask you for data, and you could have something completely different. You could have helped drive the direction to it, but now you're just adding data to confirm or disprove whatever else someone else has said, which is a lot less exciting.
Hmm. Interesting. It almost sounds like from your guys' description of product data science, it's like it's a core decision making role for what business should focus on any given time. I don't know if that's correct.
I think from our perspective, yes, but it really depends on the company culture, right? I think certain companies are some like Instagram is they're data driven, but they're very design focused first also. So like Instagram, I'm sure you guys are Instagram users, you might notice that the Instagram UI is super sleek compared to say Facebook, even though they're all the same company, but that's because Instagram is very design first. So data has a seat at table, but so does design. But I've been at other companies / interviewed at other companies where it's very clear, like decisions are made from either the leadership level and they don't always have data input, or data's just like not important. But I think to Kasia's point, right? If you're in that position, make noise and make sure you have that seat at the table and you are a product leader, because your impact is really your voice at that point, right? How do you tell the stories, and how do you convince people to do the right thing using data? And it's tough. It's an uphill battle, I'm sure, but it's worth it. I promise you.
Yeah, to your point, I've written a couple and done a couple of presentations over the past year or so about like how to work with data, how we want people to work with us. And I had a design friend that did that, and we kind of converged afterwards, and we talked about what we're talking about. And one thing that like I realized was that we all want to solve problems together, right? We don't want to be told like, hey, redesign this, give us this data. We all want to be like, okay, what is the problem at hand that we're solving? What's the kind of like strategic or business problem that we're looking at and want to think about and solve together, versus someone else solving it and just kind of using us. Okay, using is a bit of a strong word, but just kind of, treating us as an afterthought and having us feed into their already made decision.
Yeah. And I feel like those situations is really just not a good use of your data science skill, right? Like if you already have a decision that you're going to make and you already decided you're going to invest in an area or go down a certain path, and you're using data because for the sake of using data, I guess in this case, like that's really not a good use of data science, right? Your data needs to be at the beginning of your decision-making process, not like an afterthought.
Interesting. I was wondering just now, what is the difference then if with like between product data science and product analytics in this case?
I think they're the same, but Cassie, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I think it's just the same role with different titles at companies, at least from like the big tech companies that I've been looking at and have interviewed at. The two are pretty much the same. But that's just my, I have a limited sample size. I probably know like 10, 20 companies max.
Yeah, I would agree that they are mostly the same, or there was like significant overlap. I sometimes feel like the data science part has a bit of a pressure or expectation of like doing slightly more technical skills and not just use tooling to make decisions. But those lines can get so blurred um, that yeah, it can really depend on the company.
I see. Yeah, I think the naming conventions are becoming less and less relevant these days, and it's all about the company itself. Which brings me to the next question. Regarding the interviews, how, if let's say one is has set their mind to become a product analyst or product data scientist, what is the process, and how should one go about it? Should we go start with SQL? Should we build some dashboards? Should we maybe try to build our own app? Or how do we begin transitioning towards this role? Whoever wants to start.
So
I can, go ahead. Cassie, do you
yeah,
want to
so
take it?
I just wanted to like delineate between like, okay, getting into like product data science, product analytics, and like interviewing for those roles. Because my take is that like the best way to like move into that role is like trying to do more product related projects internally if you're already in an analytics role. That is always the surest path. And even if you are not able to like make that transition internally and get that official title, you can then go somewhere else and be like, well, I did these product focused projects.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I think like if you're already in a tech company, you're in an analytics function, that's going to be your best bet, right? Like find a product manager to work with, find a product data scientist to work with, ask them if you can take anything off their plate, and then just start to do those projects. But let me answer maybe the question. The way I would approach interviews, I think, it's not as simple as like do this, then this, then this, right? To me, it's a process of understanding what is needed to become a product data scientist and then putting that up against your experience that you have or your skills and figuring out what the gaps are. From there, focus on those gaps and filling those gaps, right? So, because I started in a business analyst role and went to BIE, SQL, I knew like very, very well. So I didn't need to worry about SQL. But I knew I had no product sense, and that's where I needed to invest my time. And so that's when I started studying for, I'm so extra, but I studied for product manager interviews, even though I was interviewing to be a data scientist, because I needed to understand what a product manager cares about and what a product team is all about. So for me, that's where my biggest gaps were. The other one for me was experimentation. So I invested time in also understanding that. But someone who's coming from, like, one of my clients comes from a product manager background. He just got an offer at Meta, so like super exciting. So he comes from a product manager background, but he doesn't understand like the data science side of things. So we like did a lot of work around just like, how do you think about an opportunity from a data perspective? How do you size an opportunity? How do you think about metrics? How do you think about investigating a metric decline? How do you think about experimentation? So all of the examples just to say, let's look at what you know and what is needed of you, figure out those gaps, and prioritize filling in those gaps.
Great. Yes, I was. It almost made me want to go back to LinkedIn job postings and go through the go through the requirement list. But honestly, I haven't really heard about product sense much in the past. Only when I started like preparing for interviews, I realized, my goodness, this is how the case studies are done, and apparently you need to know them. Technical skills are not enough, which is always the case. But going back to our questions, I know Kelly has asked a question. We were going to leave the Q&A stuff for the last part of our panel, but I would love to still ask this one because it's relevant to what we just talked about. So Kelly is asking, how can you move from a more junior mindset, example, you only do tasks and requests given to you, to a more senior mindset, example, you drive projects and give your insights? And this is coming from someone pretty early in their data career, only 1 year in.
So I have many thoughts. So first of all, I think you need to like get a little bit faster at the tasks you're doing. Usually early in your career, it may take you a little longer to like write SQL, QA it, write Python. If you do write Python, build a dashboard. Like some of these tasks do take you longer. So just make sure that you actually get really good at them and really comfortable with those tools. And can think fast. But the second one, going to Don's earlier point, is building product sense. Just really thinking about like, what does the user journey looks like, what the customers care about, how is your product manager thinking? And similar, like when I was interviewing for product data science role, I was practicing for both product management interviews and data science interviews. I read product management books. I sometimes still occasionally listen to like any sort of product management podcast to just get in that mindset where you can be more proactive and kind of think more like a PM. I also made a habit of always having a project backlog. So even if I'm in a reactive mode, I can think about like, okay, here's what I'm interested in. Here's what could be impactful. Here's what would be a fun project idea. And then, you can start off with like just writing project ideas, not even thinking about impact or anything about that. Just leave it really open. And then you can narrow it down and think like, okay, will this actually help the business? Would this be impactful? Is it just a curiosity? Or is this something that can feed a decision down the line? Or is this something that you can build an app off of and help people use it?
Oh yeah, I love that. I do think the first step is to like get more efficient at what you're doing, like Kasia said, because then that gives you more bandwidth to do other things. The way I think the first step for me, or at least how I did it and how I recommend other people do it, is to start going to your manager with ideas, like data projects that you can do or a data question that you want to answer, and get their feedback on it and see what they say about prioritizing that kind of work. I would start with something super small, right? And like, because going to someone with a product idea, like project idea, can seem very intimidating, but maybe you start with something really small, like, I have an intuition that our refund rates are very high only for a specific type of product. Okay, this is in an e-commerce example. And you're like, I want to check that out. And that would be a really simple like dashboard. Maybe you look at refund rates by category of purchases, right? And then start there and then slowly build it up to bigger and bigger and bigger questions. The idea is to build that trust with your manager such that they know that your intuition is right and that you're going to work on really important things. And I think every manager would appreciate that, because the more you take off their plate, the less they have to worry about you and the more they can do other things. So I think they would also be invested in helping you get more senior. The other thing I would do is to think about how you can scale impact beyond yourself, right? So if you're doing something really well, don't really be really well. If you're doing something that you like, a process that you think has made your life easier, think about how you can share that with another data scientist, or think about how you can build a process that the entire data science team can use, right? So now you're not just making yourself better, you're making other people better. Another question that my coworker at Amazon used to ask me a lot, and I think about it still to this day, is how can I automate myself out of my job? And that is such a sad outcome to think about, but it's actually really positive, right? So if you automate yourself out of your current job, then you can do even more impactful things. So if you find yourself writing the same queries over and over again, maybe you build a database and then you build the pipelines and then you build a tool on top of that so people can self-serve their data, right? Like think about how you can just make yourself more and more efficient over time and scale your impact in that way. Does that answer your question, Kelly?
Yes. Thank you, Kelly, for your questions. This is so interesting because I thought like how to automate your job, that means you won't be needed anymore in your company. And that's kind of scary already with Gen AI especially. But you're suggesting us to do it still.
My manager and I joke that if we automate ourselves out of our jobs, then we can just take PTO forever. So that's the dream.
I'm curious what could be automatable in data science. It is like it is the job, that's supposed to automate all the rest of the stuff. But yeah, I'm curious to know. Maybe later I'll ask you what do you automate. But going back to, I really like also Kasia, what you suggested about listening to product management podcasts, because I realized that's actually a good idea. If you have any favorite ones, please feel free to share on the chat or later on, or any other books that we can start reading. Um, okay, so I also had a follow-up questions on the roles. I really want to get back to like the naming because it's confusing for everyone, and I'm curious if you guys think the skills that a product data scientist have, are they applicable to a marketing data scientist, a supply chain data scientist, or like operations data scientist, or is it completely different?
I don't know if I can answer that because I haven't actually been in those roles and I don't work very much with those roles either. The closest I would say I worked with is like marketing analysts or like product growth analysts. I would say the skills are very much the same. Typically, those roles, and typically this is not 100% of the time, those roles typically would be less like technical statistically in nature, but they still have the same kind of SQL Python skills. But those roles also tend to have a lot more domain expertise, right? So if I ran an email campaign, I don't know what a good CTR is or like how to optimize the email campaign, but a marketing analyst would know these things. So I would defer to them for those kind of domain specific questions.
See.
Yeah, I would agree. I occasionally peep at like a marketing analytics job posting just because I'm curious. There's some things that like it's a little scary to me because I'm like, well, I haven't done this within like marketing domain. Like, is the lens with which you look at things and how you kind of prioritize things a little different than what you do within product? But the technical skills are usually transferable, right? Um, so it's the domain, and it really depends of like how much does the company value the domain. And I think that becomes more important throughout your career, right? And as you kind of go along and become more senior, it becomes much harder to then build that context and make that switch.
I see.
Yeah, and domain expertise is I think if you have domain expertise in something, like I would really, really lean into that as you're looking for your first data science jobs, right? So if you previously work in advertising or you previously work in healthcare, or you have like a nursing degree or doctorate degree, or whatever it is, like if that's something that you have on your resume that makes you really, really special, I would really lean into those as you're looking for your data science jobs. I feel like I'm going off course a little bit. I just like, after reviewing so many resumes, like I feel like that's the one thing people tend to undersell themselves on. So if you have domain expertise, like use it to your advantage.
Got it. Yes. So with the breadth of my own experiences, I'm like, which one do I choose? And that's a constant battle. But going on with back to the getting our first role in data science, what was the most impactful decision that you made that really helped you either accelerate your like getting that first job, or what was the roadmap, I guess, if you had one, besides just nailing the SQL and creating dashboards? Was there something else that we need to pay attention to?
I mean, I'm gonna date myself, but I feel like things have changed. And like right now, the market is just really tough. So with that caveat, I was doing a ton of online courses. And the way I approached it is like, I don't know if there's a single course I actually finished, but there were like individual concepts that I wanted to drill into. I did a lot of Kaggle. I used a lot of public data sets and I put them on GitHub. And I don't know if anybody has looked at them, but I had that ready to go. And I also networked a ton. So I was meeting with people, constantly going to events all the time, reaching out about roles that were open. Got a ton of rejection. So so just to be clear, that's something that you need to be prepared for. There's gonna be a lot of rejection, but all it takes is just one yes from someone.
Yeah, I had a very different roadmap from Kasia. I would say the only thing that's in common is a lot of rejection, and you just kind of have to stick at it. It's so worth it at the end of the day. I really believe that. And rejection sucks, but it doesn't define you. That's it. My roadmap was a lot more get my foot in the door at tech, and then study everything related to product. So when I first interviewed, I want to say 7 years ago for data science jobs, I interviewed for like something like 6 jobs, got 0 of them, but I got one business analyst job to go to Amazon. And I was like, I'm going to take it. I took a 40% pay cut to go there. But I was like, I'm going to do this because I want to get into tech. And I did that for 2 years. And then during my 2 years, I studied about, I read those product manager books, right? I studied for product manager interviews. And I tried to work with product managers as much as I could. I even like took on like product managed my own projects at work when I could. Because again, to me, well, not to me. Knowing what I knew from my first round of interviews, I knew product sense questions were the absolute hardest for me. I was failing those questions so miserably. Like it was so bad, no one had to tell me I failed them. So I knew that was my gap in my knowledge, and like I kept working on filling that gap. I think that goes back to my original point, right? Like figure out what you need to get the job, like what do you not already have, and then fill in those gaps. And for me, that was product sense, product management, how to work on a product team.
I see. That's it's crazy how you guys are indexing a lot on the product sense, although it's not really talked much, especially when you're getting your degree or just trying to break into it. Do you how one should go about it? Do we have to find like a friend to do mock interviews with? Do we have to find a mentor, or how do we create that roadmap for ourselves?
Yeah, I have a lot of
Go
thoughts
ahead.
about mentorship, so I'm gonna keep them aside. But mock interviews are great if you can find someone to pair with on those. I haven't been able to do that, but there's a ton of interview resources out there right now. Yes, there are some websites that are paid, and it may be worth investing that money. I remember when I interviewed last time 5 years ago, I invested in like a set of product case questions with sample answers. And you kind of learn a little, it feels a little bit like consulting case studies where like you learn the formula. You figure out what steps you go through. You figure out how to think about things, and the questions can be somewhat repetitive or have like a different flavor to them. But those just really teach you about like, okay, how do I answer a product question where like I'm thrown into the deep end with this new product I'm not that familiar with, and then I need to answer a data question with it. And those product cases are really, really helpful in thinking about that and preparing for those types of interviews. And every time I've done a lot of those, I feel like I come into a new role stronger because I just have like so much fresh knowledge
that I've gained through that. Yeah, I think there's so many resources out there. Some people obviously post it for free. Some people are paid. I think YouTube's a good place to start. Um, Personally, I also wrote an interview guide specifically for product data scientists. It covers like basically what Kasia is saying, right? Which is it almost feels like a consulting interview, and there's a formula to approach them, a formula that will help you get through like 95% of those questions. And if you're interested in the ebook, send me a DM on LinkedIn. I'll give you a discount so you don't have to pay full price. And I love to hear any questions, feedback you have on it. But I would say in general, practice speaking out loud as much as you can and get friends who are in the same boat as you to do those interviews with you. The reason I say that is even if they're not like in the job already, right? If you guys are on the same pace, and you read the same books and you watch the same YouTube videos, I think everyone takes something different away from it. So when you practice with your friend, like they might have noticed something that you didn't, or you might have noticed something they didn't. And just being able to share that knowledge is really, really helpful. And then I think Akasia didn't go into talking about mentorships, but I think getting a mentor is super helpful. Someone who's like been in your position, has the job that you want, reach out to them and ask them if they'll do a mock interview for you. And, I find like those are the most helpful to get to the next step, because to a large extent, you don't know what you don't know. So you don't even really know how to go out there and find the resources to solve the things that you don't know. So just having someone who's an expert do it with you is super helpful.
That's awesome. That's great advice. I honestly do not have a mentor just yet. But now that you're saying how important it is, I need to find my own very soon. Thank you, Kelly, for sending the links for our speakers, guys. Check out their links. And yes, Dawn mentioned she has a great interview prep a guideline. Feel free to go over it and get it. I'm sure there's lots of value. And Kasia, also make sure to follow Kasia. She always shares her journey online and offline and the events in San Francisco. So yeah, and let's maybe we could start open up for the questions from the audience, guys. If you have burning questions, this is the time to ask, or stay silent for the rest of your life. So let's see. Let's see what I have from the list too. I know you guys mentioned networking is important. How do you was it networking that got you a job at the end of the day, or how does everyone keeps saying networking is so important, but how do you actually strategically approach this besides just adding people on LinkedIn? Anyone?
So for me, I cold apply for all my jobs. I know the market now is really different, and I know a lot of people recommend against cold applying. I cold applied to all my jobs. I would say 50%, no, 50% of my interviews come from cold applies. But networking is really, really important. I think the couple of strategies, they might not be ranked, right? The first thing is find your target industry and find your dream company and start to connect with people in there. It doesn't matter if they're not hiring. It doesn't matter if they don't have a data science team yet. Go make those connections, right? So a lot of people have reached out to me recently about renewable energy. So I think that's like a space that a lot of people are interested in. And that's an easy one to be like, what renewable energy companies have a presence in Phoenix, Arizona? Look for those companies, find people in there and connect with them. The best way to connect, of course, is to have some like mutual connection introduce you, right? A friend of a friend, your parents' friends, I don't know. But find someone who can introduce you. That's probably the next best thing best thing you can do in your target company. I would do the intersection of those two approaches. And then I would say too, even if it's not your target company, but you see a job that you like and you see a connection who works there, or a second degree connection who works there, also reach out to them.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with it. I think it's also best to network when you already have a role and you're actually not looking. Um, and I found that really useful. So I like going to events. I like networking in general. I enjoy meetups and things like that. I pace myself so I don't do a lot of them. And I find ones where like it's a small group a lot more beneficial than like going to a big event and like trying to get 10 plus business cards or LinkedIn connections. Have 3 more deeper conversations where you actually get to know someone, you hear about their work, you learn about their company or the team. And then whenever you are applying for roles, you can ask for that referral. I got my current role through a referral through someone I had worked with in the past. My previous job came from cold applying. My job before that actually came through networking when the recruiter came to a networking event that I was there. So I reached out to her afterwards. So it really can be a mixed bag. Um, and the other thing is like right now I'm getting like so much outreach and people are often asking like, can you grab 15-minute coffee with me, talk to me about your role? And honestly, I just get so much of it that the answer is like usually no, because I just don't have the bandwidth to talk to so many people. You want to help to everyone, you want to help everyone, but it's just not feasible. Um, so it can really vary, but making connections is always great, and like especially on those in person events, you know, kind of chatting a little bit with someone, learning about them is always a great thing to do.
Especially if you live in San Francisco.
The introvert in me is like, I cannot believe people are meeting in person. But that's definitely the best way to do it, right? Like in-person connection is way better than online connection. But I'm like, oh wow, should I start going to these events?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a
Yes.
great tip.
Yes, I'm a big fan of in-person events too, but I have never actually I think took my time and only talked with like 3 people or 2 people. I'm the one who takes 10 business cards at the end of the day and calls it a success, even though next day I forget their first and last name. And I so like I don't know if that has worked in the past, but I do want to slow down and focus on people, which is a great tip. Great. So, guys, I know there's people in here. Please ask your questions now, if you have any about product data science. And can you guys tell me also, how do you even choose, like, what is your dream company besides being the user of their products? Like, what do you look at when choosing a company?
I have 3 criteria, and I tell every hiring manager I talk to that in the first time I talk to them. Um, this was before. This is no Instagram was before this. Instagram was always my dream, and once I hit that, now I have different criteria. For me, the 3 things are compensation. I'm very clear. I will go to the company that pays me best. Work-life balance. I tell them, and this is not a joke, but if Beyonce asked me to go on tour tomorrow, I am dancing on tour at Beyonce. I'm quitting this job. So like work-life balance is really important to me. And then the third thing is career progression. Like I need to know there is 1, people who are more senior than me who can mentor me to take me to the next level. 2, I need to know that my manager is invested in my growth. And 3, I need to know their scope and opportunity for me to grow in the role. So to me, compensation, work-life balance, and growth opportunities.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it kind of like changed every time I was looking for a role. Most recently, I knew that worked at 3 companies for, and each of my stints was like between a year to a year and a half, and I knew I wanted to stay somewhere longer. So I was like, okay, I want to work with people that can see myself working with for 2, 3 plus years.
Mm.
So that was really important to me. And actually, what tipped the scale is that my first manager invited me after I got the offer, invited me to come for coffee. Just very casual. It was like, hey, do you want to meet the team? I asked some difficult questions. I asked questions about like how is diversity on the team, and that's a telltale sign of like not necessarily the answer, but even how people handle that question. And I thought that my manager did a great job, didn't sugarcoat how things were, kind of described his point of view, what he's doing about this, things like that. So that was really important. And then, as you said, career growth opportunities, mentorship, anything like that was the career progression. What's the problem space that those companies are working on? Or what do I know about their data team and like where it's going, what stage they're at, right? Like, are they building things from scratch? How much data do they have? Like, is there enough data for me to play around with? And I actually had that company reach out some time ago that I talked to, and I realized I was like, their data set is too small. Like, I just know that I want to work with something bigger. And that was an interesting realization that I didn't know beforehand.
I love this. If your data set is too small, I'm not working with you. Great. These are great. It's interesting how you guys didn't say anything about like big tech and Mang, and how everyone is like try to put that as like a top choice, but in fact, just knowing the team is much more important, especially the manager.
Yeah, your managers make or break. I mean, I'm sure a lot of us here have had bad managers before, and it like really changes your experience.
Hmm. Yeah, I would love to hear more about that. But Octopus over here was asking a question. For Meta specifically, their SQL interviews seem to be around finding ratios or percentages per my previous interview experience with them. Are there any recommendations for preparing towards these kind of questions?
So I think I'm a bit confused by the question. Is your question around like how to define those ratios, or like what, like actually the SQL for writing those?
I think he's writing. But I assumed, oh, how to code them in SQL, the ratios and
Mhm.
percentages. Do you mean like
I
statistics?
thought,
Yeah.
uh,
I thought maybe Octopus. Are you asking about questions related to statistics or combinatorics, math, and how to prepare for those? Because if you do, there's lots of. I use Data Lemore specifically. I don't know if you guys know this one. I just tend to like his platform a lot more than LeetCode. But there's LeetCode too. Coding interviews, for instance. Oh, calculating CTR. Hmm.
I feel like it's probably just practice, right? Like data lemur, I don't know. In my head, I say lemur, but that lead code, yeah, like probably any uh like regular SQL practice questions should like platform should help you. I think maybe the trick is when you have a ratio is to code the numerator first, then code the new denominator. Then you can just combine them together in the third piece if that makes it easier for you to think through ratios and percentages.
I love how they straight up went to the technical questions over here. It's like, are we
I
talking
feel like you're interview.
with the real product data scientists or not? Let's check your SQL, guys. Um, that's awesome. By the way, how much of Python versus SQL do you guys use on a day-to-day basis?
I'm like 95% SQL,
Hmm.
maybe 5% Python. Most of my job, I try to keep my solutions, just given the stage of the company I'm at, right? Is there's a lot of low hanging fruit. There's a lot of easy data questions that need to be answered. And so most of it can be answered in SQL. So I haven't had to pull up Python in a very long time. The only time I pull up Python is when I want to code up like pooled graphs or like, complicated graphs. Or if I'm running the same query like over and over again, I just want to loop it, then I'll put it into Python. And then the third use case is when you're building pipelines, you wrap your SQL in Python code. But I typically would say I do most of my work in SQL. I'm really curious, Kasia, what your ratio is like.
Yeah, more of my work is in SQL than it is in Python, and there is also a lot of work that can be done just using tooling, whether it's like a BI tool. Like Looker is a perfect example, or like there's another language, LookML, that you have to use. Um, so it's a mix. I'm definitely trying to move more towards doing things in Python because that's the state of maturity that like my team is and like what I want to do for my personal growth. Um, but yeah, definitely always more heavy in SQL. And the interesting thing was that very early in my career, I was actually doing a lot of Python. Like I was doing everything in Python.
Mm-hmm.
And my manager sat me down and was like, you're slowing yourself down. Like there's a lot of things that can be done a lot faster in SQL. So get as far as you can in SQL and then switch to Python for doing the calculations on top of that you can't use SQL for. And that advice kind of served me well. So even if I use a notebook, I often like pull data from a query, do some munging with that query, and then use Python on top of that.
Hmm. Interesting, because wow, you guys are debunking some myths for me. Because I always thought that if you want to be a data scientist, you must focus on Python, and here we are saying that majority of it still happens with SQL. Yeah, because even like when it comes to, but how are you supposed to do your personal projects if everything, like in data science, all the Kaggle data science and like projects are all in Python. But when it comes to getting a job, you want to show that you're proficient in SQL. Does that mean that maybe you could do some more SQL projects or?
You can load your data sets into MySQL and then run it in MySQL, right? So take the same data sets and just load it up into MySQL instead of putting it in Python. That's what I would say. Generally, I think for SQL too, there's a lot more ways to just practice through like LeetCode and all the other platforms. So I would say for SQL, how do I put this? I think for SQL, you get to a point where you're good at it for interviews versus for Python, it's more about project-based demonstration of your skills. So just for context, I interview a lot. So like this is from my experience. Usually the Python questions I get are like a full case question, right? An hour where you're just coding up stuff in Python. SQL tends to be is shorter and they're more like in chunks. So they ask you like 3 questions within 30 minutes. If that helps you understand like what kind of questions you would get SQL versus Python.
Right. That's why we have to prepare with LeetCode and Data Limor platforms. But those, I feel like those are kind of limiting too, because they don't give you the full data set and you can't do much besides answering the specific question. But I thought you were going to mention how else we could prepare besides those platforms for the SQL part.
But that's kind of my hot take here, is that you don't really need to go beyond that, right? Like you don't need to get creative with SQL. Often when you have a SQL interview, like there is a specific question, you need to answer that. You don't need to go beyond that. Like all they are looking for is like testing that you can pull the data that you need in that specific format with specific filters over a specific time frame or anything like that. Like whereas like when you're doing an end-to-end project with Python, there is a lot more room to be creative, to kind of have that open-ended question that you can take somewhere, wherever you're choosing to take it.
Interesting. I see. Got it. I need to brush up my SQL again. Each time it's like
I would say
cycle.
that. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say that, and I completely agree, right? SQL is very interesting because there's 10 commands that you use 90% of the time, maybe, and there's just not a lot of creativity involved. Yeah. The way to set yourself apart during SQL interviews is 1, really understand the business use case and use that to inform your querying. And then 2, understand all your edge cases. And then 3, figure out how to optimize your query. So it's much more about like demonstrating you are an advanced SQL user than a creative SQL user.
Much more important to show that you're more advanced or creative.
More advanced. Like you in the job, you can write great SQL queries. They're optimized, and you know how to look out for edge cases.
I'm writing it down and sharing it so people remember, and I'll remember too. Great. MetaZen, what should they repeat exactly? Oh, and okay, let's go back to the questions. I'm so glad I learned SQL, but I'm hoping to level up in Python. Good job. Let's see. Okay, good. SQL. What I'm looking for. Okay, how do you optimize SQL? I don't know if you guys want to touch on that. Maybe there's like an overarching theme there. If not, you can pinpoint at the resources too.
I'm gonna send you all some resources. There and some creators have put up really good posts. But generally, I would say 1, you need to understand how databases are designed, right? And then so you can optimize it. So okay, that's not very specific, but let's say your database is partitioned on date, and you want to filter on date because that would just run faster. So again, that's understanding your database design. And then 2, the general idea is whenever you're doing joins, make the tables as small as possible so the joins will be easier, right? If you join 1 million rows against 1 million rows, you're at some crazy number I don't even know how to say. But if you join 100 roles and you join it with 10 roles, then you only get 1,000. So that becomes a lot more optimized. But I will send you all tips based on from other creators. I'm sure Kasia has some resources too. They're just some basic things that you can look over to optimize your SQL queries.
Yeah, there was like a whole bunch of articles online about like different tips on how to optimize your SQL. If you want to play around with it, the fun thing is sometimes to like figure out two different ways in which we can write the same query and get that same data and just look at the runtime, because if it runs faster, it means it's more optimal. So that's sometimes fun to do as well.
Yeah, that's actually a great tip. Like experiment yourself, then you can start to build your intuition around what works and what doesn't work.
So you're suggesting us to fail many times.
Gotta go through the rejections.
Got it. You have to work through pain. Yeah. Awesome. You learn by failing, Kelly. I know. It looks like it. But anyway, guys, ask your last questions. I hope you guys enjoyed this panel. I am going to share the recording on YouTube. And if you haven't already, connect with both of the speakers. And please also share with us if you guys are offering any one-on-ones or mentorship or coaching or anything that people can people can use.
I mean, I mentor regularly through a bunch of different groups like Data Angels. They have a formal mentoring program. I usually like doing these like longer term programs. And if you're interested in community groups and any resources, I have my website linked on my LinkedIn, where I have a whole section for like both books, but also websites, community groups, some interview resources, things like that you can check out.
I do one-on-one coaching. For me, I really like the one-on-one part of it because I feel like then I can really understand where you're at, understand your problems, and then try and figure out how to help you specifically. This has been like the most rewarding thing I've done in my data science career. So yeah, if that's something you're interested in, reach out to me.
That's awesome. Thank you guys for doing the service for the community. And I hope you will be here and break into data as well, because we do have many people that trying to get into data science and they don't know much about product. So would love to have you here. And Madhav is asking, how do you build deep connections? What are your go-to deep questions? I guess when you make professional connections.
I feel like that one's for you.
Yeah.
You're the in-person networker.
That's true.
It's a loaded question, right? So you want to like care about what the other person cares about, or like what it is that they are interested in, right? Like you want to make sure that this is authentic, and if people can feel that you're doing this to get something out of them, like people can very easily pick up on things that are transactional, and they're not going to feel good about it. So practice active listening, right? So listening just to listen, not to respond, and not kind of going over the responses in your head. And it's so difficult. And just be interested in like whatever someone else may care about. And be aware that with some people you're going to connect and it's going to be great and very easy. With some other people it may be more difficult, or it may take longer, or they may not just click with you immediately or be open to it. So be prepared for that, and just make sure that like you respect wherever someone is at and whatever boundaries they may have around that.
Love this.
Yeah, I would say +1 to active listening, right? Like a lot of your conversation is just hearing what they say and reacting to what they say rather than like just kind of talking at them. The other thing I would say is with building relationships, reciprocity is really important, right? You don't want to go to someone and ask them for favors right away or just be asking questions nonstop. Try to build that like mutual connection where you give some and you take some. Something that feels like they're also getting something out of talking to you, and they are, right? Like we're all interesting, unique human beings. So like share your gift with them, and then they will share theirs with you.
I love this. I want to add to this too because I'm a big proponent of active listening. Because people don't understand this, because when you give someone a space to talk about what they're passionate about, you're giving them a gift already. So it's like you listening is already something that you give to them. And so many people don't realize this, but if you know how to do it, then you are a giver. um yeah, so let's see, do we have any more? Let's do this last one. Hor is asking, do you guys do statistics? I guess in your day-to-day, do you use any statistics? Like the nods.
Yes. I think for me, primarily a lot of experimentation, anything that goes in experiment space, right? So hypothesis testing. Primarily, that's where I do most of my stats, at least in my current role. In previous role, I've done more like you build say a linear regression model to try and figure out which of the features are most correlated with some output that you care about. But typically, I would say, at least in my roles, you need to know statistics to like, I would say an intermediate level, but you don't need to know to like, for product data science, you don't need to know like deep neural network learning. I don't even actually know the words clearly. You don't need to know deep machine learning for our jobs. I made a post about this. I can share it. I'll share it with Mary later and then she can share it out.
Yes, please feel free to share it here in the chat too, so people
I
can.
can find it.
Oh, sure. This,
I,
I love this. What about you, Kasia? Do you use any statistics in your data science job?
I mean, yes. And I feel like it's one of the areas that I'm also trying to like up level myself
Mm,
in quite a lot. Because you can really go beyond the basics. And do some interesting things. But yeah, a lot of experimentation. That's the easiest one, where there's a lot of statistics, any sort of causal inference, where there's a lot of statistics, right? Machine learning, that's a lot of statistics. So you really need to know when to apply those concepts in a very practical way.
got it. Great. Awesome. I think this has been a success. I thoroughly enjoyed your presence and your experiences, because now I know a little bit more about product data science, and that I have options besides just grinding on Python and machine learning. It sounds like it's a bit more like integrated with others, and it's more people oriented, but at the same time it has a lot of insights into data, and that's what I like anyway. So I'm gonna give it a second thought, and I'm gonna have to catch up with you guys. And yeah, thank you guys for asking all of the questions. Kelly, also, by the way, is a data analyst, and she creates content on LinkedIn. I'm sure you must know her. I don't know if you do, but please connect. Everyone who's here, feel free to share your LinkedIn so we can connect better and stay in touch. Yes, Kelly, we'll join you on the product side. Um, it's fine if you don't know me. Okay. Great. Got it. Awesome. I'm going to share the recording as well. But you guys have a great weekend, and I hope to see you more in the server and on LinkedIn, and hopefully in real life, offline too. We'll see.
yeah, that would be amazing. Thank you so much for organizing this, Mary. And Kasia, so nice chatting with you in this forum. And thank you everyone for your questions.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, everyone, so much. Enjoy the long weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Awesome. Okay. Great job, everyone. I think hopefully this was useful. We're gonna have more speakers like this every single week, and hopefully, if you guys have any suggestions on who we should bring, please let me know. uh I do not know who do I have. Oh, who do I have planned next? We have many people, but I always need more. And nice to see you guys here, Kelly, Marav, always coming up with great questions. I think I need to get back to SQL. um, and guys, if tomorrow we have accountability calls every Saturday, feel free to join at 10:15 a.m. Don't ask me why we have that time. That's a weird time, but we'll see you there. And have a great weekend, everyone. Bye bye.